possibly the platform also can help the clients to operate the cloud efficiently.
Yep.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
It's super hard to maybe thinking someone to create a platform that does end-to-end journey, but it's very nice to hear that. Hey, I'm Michael Branches, and you are tuning into the StackSpot Insight. Thanks for our time today. Once a month, we meet you guys here to provide what the best in technology, what's happening in the world in terms of providing a best service to the companies and clients. Today, I have a pleasure to have with me joining this conversation with you today, Deli Matsuo, our COO for Zoop StackSpot Innovation in US. Thanks for joining us, Deli. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And it's going to be an interesting conversation because we are celebrating our 7th month. We started the operation in US in February this year. We have been talking to many different clients, global banks, different industries, and which is interesting point, we are seeing very common problems in different stages and size of clients. We're going to share some of the information with you guys. Before we start, it's important to you that we are seeing us today. Please make sure you click on the link, continue to engage with us, and making sure you continue to visit our page and ask us questions during the journey. So talking about our journey so far, since February, as I mentioned, we have started working with clients and prospects and understand their journey, especially providing a completely different and better experience for developers. Deli, it's interesting because we're seeing companies thinking about delivering a better service for businesses specifically. And they mentioned that have a lot of challenge to onboard developers, starting to coding much faster, and at the end of the day, speeding up the information to the business. Any thought about that? I know you're talking with many CTOs and CIOs in US. What's your first thought about that?
I think what we see, the main reason for us to build this product is related to productivity gains, right? The first impression that people have when they scale a team from maybe a few dozen people to a few hundred people, they assume that if you 10x the size of the team, you're going to 10x your throughput. And that's not really even close to what happens. So when you scale the organization 10x the size of your team, productivity doesn't follow. And that's where you realize that you need to have a platform to help you gain productivity back. So it goes from onboarding engineers, because as a small company, it's very easy to define who has access to what and which stack they should have. You can easily in a meeting say, hey guys, this is what we're gonna do, this is the stack we're gonna use. When you have a few hundred people with very senior people leading different teams, each team makes a decision based on their specific needs, right? So in the end, you have several different stacks, and that becomes slow to onboard people because you need to define which stack each person needs to be able to access, which database they need to have access to, and all of that slows down the onboarding of engineers. The second thing that happens is, as you have 100 or a few hundred engineers in your team, is about policy enforcement, right? So you define, this is the procedure, standard procedure for cryptography on a database, but not everyone follows that, and it's very hard for you to enforce. It's very hard for you to check and avoid that people register their username and password within the code. So those issues that become more and more complicated as you scale, typically impact your productivity. And an engineer platform like StackSpot can help you regain that speed very quickly.
That's very interesting. In terms of efficiency, based on what you just said, we have heard that possibly companies having time frame about 3 weeks to 3 months from the developer starting the idea to start coding.
Yep.
What's your thought in terms of using the platform to accelerate that topic?
Well, typically, if you're using a platform, any platform for that matter, that does that onboarding, if you built it correctly, you should be able to have someone up and running in half a day, maybe less.
Wow.
So, usually a company would take a few weeks to get someone to be able to sit down and start coding. For anyone using a platform like an engineering platform, you should be able to do it in a couple of hours.
I want to reinforce what Deli mentioned because we have talked to a few clients in US, just an example. Some of the clients, they mentioned that we have summer camps in US. A lot of students, they go and work for a company, and usually they takes 6 weeks programs at summer camps. And we have seen companies need 3 weeks to just starting the onboarding process, as Deli mentioned. So think about your company reducing these 3 weeks or more, and have your summer camps or developer journey reduced from that time frame to a few hours or a day. It's very interesting.
Yeah, especially if you're if you're joining in a summer internship and you're trying to learn, right, as a new engineer, having 3 weeks more of training, and that's the goal of an internship, it's significant, right? If you join a large organization and they take 6 weeks to get you up to speed, then you missed a big chunk of your summer internship.
Yeah. So you mentioned about connect and put all the software infrastructure ready for the developers to really start coding. And also another topic, accelerating the coding process. There are a lot of discussions about using AI to accelerate that, etc. What's your thought in terms of use Gen AI for accelerating the code?
Right. So if you think of what the goal of StackSpot is, right? The goal of StackSpot is to increase throughput and productivity of a large engineering team. In order to do that, you have to do a couple of things. First is you need to get them on board and ready to start coding from day one. That I think we solved and it works pretty well. Now, once they start coding, then you have a couple of things you can do in order to increase their throughput. First, and obviously most common, is reuse of code, right? So we have a library full of plugins and applications that you realize based on whatever your company does or whatever is in the library from StackSpot. And you gain a lot by not having to write basic code. Second thing you can do once you start coding is the use of agents. Now it's very common that you see Copilot as an example of you utilizing AI to help you code faster. The best analogy I can give you is if you want to translate something from Portuguese to English and you have someone who can write English pretty well, that's what Copilot does, right? But now if you want someone who's going to write in English about, arts, you probably want to hire someone who understands arts in order to write a text that is about that specific subject. So what StackSpot does is it reads whatever your team is building in terms of product and understands your context in order to provide you the suggestions of code for your work. So what that does accelerates your development because it takes into consideration your context, your catalog of APIs, your repository, all of your previous code, and then suggests code to you based on your reality. If you're just using a generic AI agent, what it does is it writes in English. It doesn't necessarily know the context in which you're operating in. So there's a big difference in productivity when you compare those agents.
That's very interesting. And I think what's the StackSpot Gen AI use, we call knowledge source. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
So in terms of translating the arts example you mentioned to a company specifically, I think what we do is we understand and we teach the LLM using the company's architecture, input this architecture into the knowledge source. And then when the developer asks something to the LLM or the Gen AI, they connect it previously into the knowledge source to teach the LLM how the best way to respond to that. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And it does an incredible job at it. It's really impressive how LLM is able to merge together the previous knowledge of a language, let's say Java, if you're writing Java, and then add the context of your repository and your API catalog. And then once you request something from the LLM, it already takes that into consideration and builds you code based on whatever your team is already building. It's very contextual heavy, and it makes a huge difference in advancing your code very quickly.
Super nice.
Yeah.
In terms of languages or codes that maybe developers are thinking, do you guys accelerate Java coding on Python or .NET? And it could be any one of them.
It could be any one of them.
And I have heard also companies looking to the platform to also modernize or legacy modernization.
Yep.
It's also, when you think about legacy modernization, including modernizing COBOL to Java as an example?
Yes. So if you think of the US market, right, and maybe the largest tech teams, apart from the new tech, is probably the banking industry, financial services. So, and they have dozens of years of development in mainframe system. And it's a pretty expensive environment to operate in. And if you want to scale or modernize anything, it's really expensive to build code. So they want to migrate into modern platforms from distributed systems to the cloud, or from mainframe to the cloud, and they want to migrate from COBOL to Java, for instance. But it's a pretty daunting task. And what we do is we help them with Gen AI, and the agent will actually read the code, the original code in COBOL, understand the structure, then translate that into new code, reimagine that code in a new language that you choose to be Java, for example, or Python, and then write that code, take into consideration what you were trying to do, understanding what the original piece of code was trying to build, understanding your context and API catalog, and rebuilding everything in microservices already, all broken up in microservices for you. So it's a very interesting way of modernizing the legacy, and is a journey that most of the large corporations in America are going through, right? They need to migrate out of the old platforms into the modern platform, but it's pretty hard to do in the beginning. And the agent can help companies accelerate the process tremendously.
And I think people, when they listen about COBOL specifically, they think about hallucination, how the LLM, because the LLM hallucinates a lot. And I understand using COBOL to not convert, but to modernize the COBOL into a new language. Again, using the knowledge source, that also reduces a lot the hallucination, also the quality, improve the quality of the conversion to the new language.
So the best way we find to reduce or eliminate hallucination in generating text or generating code is to provide very precise, narrow definitions of context. So if you ask a very generic question, they might use the wrong data source and provide you the wrong answer. And that's hallucination. It's not understanding really what you're trying to do, where you're trying to get, and providing the wrong information because it takes the wrong logical pathway. But if you provide a very precise context, then the odds of hallucination are much, much smaller. That said, it's important for you to understand that once we build the code generated by the AI agent, it's not supposed for you to just like, oh yeah, sure, let's put it into production. That's not the way it works, right? It's an assistant. So we do expect the senior engineers to look at the code and say, yeah, this is what I need, or no, maybe I need to tweak this a little bit. So it's never going to just go crazy and implement code. It's not allowed to do that. The engineer needs to actually review, make sure it's okay, and then deploy.
And I like that because the goal is not to replace software engineers, to absolutely accelerate the journey and especially increase the quality of the development.
Correct, yeah.
It's interesting. Talk about efficiency again. You mentioned about increasing the efficiency from the package information from 3 months or a weeks to hours a day. How about efficiency with Gen AI, accelerating the coding process?
So we actually did a demo to a bank in the US. We made this short demo, and the engineer that was watching the demo was the original code base in COBOL, a feature, and we wanted to connect to the API, public API of the bank, and then build a code in Java that would take the API and the old COBOL text in consideration and build a new code in microservice in Java. So the engineer literally did that in maybe 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And the engineer said, wow, this would have taken me 2 days to do if I had to do it by hand. So it's that impressive, right? So not every example will be like that, but on average, we do expect the productivity to increase tremendously. And at this point, our initial tests show that they're between 50 to 70% increase in productivity on average for engineers, which is a lot.
Also another topic that, I super enjoy what you mentioned, because we start talking about the idea, we move to putting more productivity, starting to coding, and now we talked about accelerating the coding process. There are maybe people thinking, okay, the end goal is to modernize and put my legacy information into the cloud. Do you have any thoughts about if the companies want to move the modernization and the software implementation into the cloud? Any thoughts about how the platform can help them to do that?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it. Let's assume an example, right? Let's assume that you work in a company that has a legacy system built on mainframe. You want to move to the cloud. People assume that you can just like shut down one and open the next one. That's really not the way it happens, right? It happens is you build parts of microservices on the cloud platform, and then you start moving process to the cloud and still run those two environments at the same time. So you want to have a team that is able to run your legacy system, and you want to have a team that is able to build the new architecture. Now, typically a company doesn't have the resources in-house because they only have the legacy system. They don't have the new system. So they need to hire people for the new system. They need to keep the people running the current system. They need to eventually train and migrate them over. But it's a new way of coding, right? And they need to understand microservices, have done it before because it's a critical system typically. So it needs to be done, by very experienced engineers. So once you build that logic and you start migrating, then once you building the second one, it's easier. The third one is even easier, and so on and so forth. But it takes time, and you're going to have both systems running at the same time. What we learned in our experience working with the largest bank in Latin America, and probably one of the only banks in the world that migrated a large chunk of their code base to the cloud, is it takes a lot, right? You need to have a large team in order to do that, and you're going to spend a lot more money. But if you start to utilize an accelerator like StackSpot, then you can reduce that investment quite a bit. And we believe that this is the best way of doing it. And this is how we're doing today at our first client, the bank, because now with StackSpot, we're able to do what we used to do with a lot of people, with a very small team that are very productive, and they're very fast to move things along. One, because we learned how to do it. Two, because the platform really helps us accelerate the process. So for anyone thinking of moving legacy systems to the cloud, our recommendation is utilize a platform. Obviously, my recommendation is that you utilize our platform, but it doesn't have to be. If you're willing to build your own platform, if you're interested in using another platform, whatever you decide to use, it can help you progress very quickly.
That's very interesting. In terms of, I love your mention about the modernizing and moving the content, the applications to the cloud. In terms of operating the cloud, there are companies that are understanding, okay, I love your topics mentioned about my application going smoothly to the cloud, but I don't know how to operate the cloud. I don't know how to find ops specifically, how to make my cloud journey really efficient in terms of cost, etc. Any thoughts about that as well?
Yeah, we offer, within our portfolio of services, we offer professional services. And the professional service team in our company is very well versed in running cloud-based systems. Obviously, we do it for probably the largest cloud customer in the region in Latin America. So we have a pretty sizable team that runs that. And we're pretty experienced in optimizing the cloud cost. But one thing that people always ask us, and companies are starting the journey, they think, oh, wait a minute, if I move out of mainframe to cloud, I'm going to spend less money. That's really not how it happens, because what happens, at least with our experience, is once you decide to start modernizing your product, you tend to become a tech product-centric company, right? You move away from being a traditional brick and mortar business to becoming a software tech company. And once you do that, your customers will start to utilize your applications a lot more. So you don't necessarily save money, but what happens is the number of transactions you're going to have online is going to multiply tremendously. And because of the increase of interactions with your user, your cost might not necessarily diminish. Your cost on brick and mortar side of your business might diminish, but your digital cost will certainly increase. But that's a good thing, because in the end, it means that your user, your client, is interacting with your company a lot more, and that makes it a lot more sticky.
At the end of the day, the goal is to reduce the cost of a transaction.
Correct.
Even if the number of transactions is growing exponentially.
And I think that's a fair game, right? If you can reduce the average cost per transaction because you're utilizing a more modern architecture, that's ideal, right? And if you also increase the number of transactions electronically, ideally that means that you're making more interactions with your customer, you're selling more, you're making more revenue. If your only goal is to reduce your IT cost, I don't think that's strategic, right? You might just reduce the number of interactions you have with your customer, and that's going to reduce your revenue. I think the goal is reducing the average cost per transaction, which is the point you're making.
Yeah. So in summary, if I understood correctly, so the platform might provide a different experience from the idea to package all the information the developer need to start coding, accelerating the code experience, including the legacy modernization, moving all those legacy modernization and up to a cloud-based model, and possibly the platform also can help the clients to operate the cloud efficiently.
Yep.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
It's super hard to maybe thinking someone to create a platform that does end-to-end journey, but it's very nice to hear that.
We hope so. We hope it's very hard for everybody else to do it. It took us a long time to get to this point, but we do believe that we can help companies regain productivity in large operations, right? With large engineering teams, because this is the first realization we had when we did this with our bank here in Latin America. We tripled the number of engineers. We had about, 5,000 to 6,000 engineers. Now we have 15,000 engineers, right? So in a few years, we tripled the number of engineers, and we didn't see that growth in productivity. And now we understand that the platform is the key to make sure that we regain that productivity and accelerate the productivity. And with AI, that number is gonna increase. The productivity is gonna just be a lot faster. But it took us 2 years to build this. It's a pretty massive undertake, and especially the AI part is not simple to build and put into production. But we're in a very good position at this point. We're comfortable and we're happy to see the results that we're producing. We are looking for new customers to try it out with us and experiment and see if it works for them. And if it does, as we believe it will, it could be a game changer.
Perfect. And speaking of clients and developers that want to reach out and talk to us, it's important that we're going to be joining a few events the second half of the year. So one is the QCon conference in San Francisco, first week of October. So you guys, developers, a lot about this QCon conference. We're going to talk more deeply about how the team developed that platform, very technical, the journey, how we did that, and what's the information you need to develop your own platform or use StackSpot for your company. And also the AWS reInvent, right? We're gonna also join in November, end of November in Vegas, to all companies that they want to move to cloud or they are already in the cloud, they want to innovate, and it's very especially want to increase their workload time frame and usage of the cloud to get more competitive and cost effective. Super interesting. Thanks a lot for your time, Deli. It's a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure.
We're super happy what we are seeing in the US, and hope we can connect with more clients and people that need help. So the topic we discussed today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.